Okay, I just got the thumbs up from AACS. Hey, Gary, you can join us at the table if you want. Yeah. So Gary is the city planner, and he is here as sort of a planning matter expert.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
So welcome once again to our Future Use Committee for Highland Country Club. This is the third and final public hearing as of right now for the future use of Highland. We've had two previous hearings, and both of those are available on AACS. The point of this hearing, or not hearing, excuse me, it's not for a choice of words, the point of this meeting is to solicit ideas from the public about what we could do with Highland Country Club in the future. There is no one thing we're going to do with Highland Country Club. We also don't want to turn it into a theme park and have 10 or 15 different things going on at Highland Country Club. But we wanted to take ideas from the public and then vet those ideas, talk those ideas out. I've been recording the ideas over the last two meetings and then this meeting, and we'll probably start, depending on how long we go today, we might even start some of the discussion about the deliberation, if you will, about the future use, where we've just kind of asked questions. But today, looks like we have a handful of people in the audience, about half a dozen people or so. And before we get started, let's go ahead around the room, tell people what ward you live in, because when I selected people for this, I got about 50 or 70 or so letters of interest. People told me some of their ideas, but I wanted to make sure that people from all over the city, 2 people from each ward, were selected, with the exception of Ward 2, where Highland Country Club is. There are 3 people from there. And I also have 3 city councilors on this. Gary Arazian's helping out because he's a planner, so he can help us with what we can and should do, or not can and should do, what we can and can't do is probably a better choice of words, because he knows the limitations of some uses. So let's just go around the room and tell what your name is for the audience, as well as where you're from in Attleboro. Go ahead.
Phil Katsalis, Ward 1.
Bob Withers, Ward 6.
Laurie Kelly, Ward 2.
Leo Johnson, Ward 6.
Paul Hero, Mayor. I also happen to live in Ward 2.
Heather Wayhead, Ward 4.
Laura Dillon, Ward 5.
Fred Uriot, Ward 5.
George Piggott, Ward 2.
Margie Kelly, Ward 3.
Diane Holmes, Ward 6.
Daryl Velez, Ward 5.
Peter Gay, Ward 2.
Carol Conley, Ward 4.
Very good.
I'm Gary Arazian, I'm the planner.
So thank you everybody for being here, and let's go ahead and get started. Originally, when I was doing this, I thought I would have like 40 or 50 people going out the door, and we'd have to limit it to 2 to 3 minutes each, but that hasn't happened. So we don't really have a time limit, but just you know, go ahead and get up and give your spiel. Who wants to go first, just step up to the podium.
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
Do you mind? I have family photos after this, so if you don't mind, I'll be brief.
Okay. And when you go up to the podium, go ahead and say your name, your address, just for the audience. And also, if you're part of a board or a commission in Attleboro and you want to identify that, feel free. So, all right.
Hello, my name is Ben Kudo. I am a resident of Ward 5 and the chairperson of the Attleboro Cultural Council. At our last meeting, we had a group discussion about some of our ideas for the best use. And so I wanted to come here with the encouragement of the group to present as a representative of the group. And I brought a letter to be entered into the minutes, as well as some diagrams. If you don't mind, I'd just like to pass those out to the group. So we'll just take a moment.
While Ben's handing those out, I just wanted to remind everybody, this is a task force under the executive privilege, and so this is not subject to the open meeting law. So the normal rules of a regular public meeting are not held during this. In other words, we don't keep minutes. There's no documentation that's required, subject under the public records request or anything. This is a task force under executive privilege. So just want to mention that again. I've mentioned that each of the meetings before. You guys can just share. Sorry. Cool. Thank you. I like it. guys create this?
Yes, we did.
I like it.
So what we presented is an aerial view of Highland Country Club, and we've superimposed a half shell and also a throughway. So I have some prepared statements that I also presented in a letter, and if you don't mind, I'd just like to read through that for everybody. Dear Mayor Huro and the Highland Country Club Steering Committee, the Attleboro Cultural Council is a local chapter of the Massachusetts Cultural Council, a state agency that fosters the arts, science, and culture by awarding sponsorship grants to local cultural causes. In this capacity, we have a keen sense of the city, what needs we have, and what needs we have culturally. We have discussed the following opinions and recommendations and ask that you take them into consideration. When you move to Attleboro, no doubt the first place any Attleborian will tell you about is Capron Park. It is the emerald of the jewelry city. If you've ever visited Capron Park on the 4th of July, though, you know that it's bursting at the seams. Parking during this time is a public safety hazard, overflowing into the side streets and congesting the city to the point of a public nuisance. Furthermore, accessibility is low for elderly and those with mobility issues. It is lacking sidewalks and accessibility-friendly amenities. Not a surprise, since Capron Park was designed and engineered in 1901, 7 years before the first Model T rolled off the assembly line in Detroit. With the purchase of Highland Country Club, Attleboro has seized a once-in-a-generation opportunity to expand its footprint and should boldly take a giant leap, not a tepid, cautious step. With the construction of the new high school and required parking lot, Attleboro should capitalize on this by expanding parking and adding a throughway to connect the main parking lot to the existing clubhouse and parking lot. The throughway should have parking on both sides, beautiful sidewalks, and most importantly, be highly accessibility friendly. There should be walking paths and bike loops. Every park, and even a parking circle for food trucks during special events. In being awarded the contract to build our multi-million-dollar school, the construction company should be fully committed to building a parking lot that not only meets their minimum requirements, but better than that, will serve our community as well once they are done and gone. Not only should there be a temporary use lot for construction equipment, but the expectation should evolve into a multi-use parking lot, sidewalks, walking and bike paths, and a speed-bumped throughway lined with parking spots. Rather than a 300 car lot, which was adequate when the school was originally built, we propose for a 900 plus cars, a lot for 900 plus cars and 100 plus bicycles. With this vital infrastructure in place, the Attleboro Cultural Council and other community groups can form a coalition to raise funds and build a half-shell community amphitheater. Now, when the 4th of July is celebrated, we will have a location that is suitable not only for today's standards, but for our future generations' needs. We have submitted for your consideration an aerial rendering of Highland Country Club property with both the proposed lot, throughway, as well as half-shell for your consideration. We thank you for the opportunity to speak to you and appreciate your dedication in this endeavor. Ben Kudo on behalf of the Cultural Council.
So Ben, I love this idea. Are these different proposed? No, there's just one's enlargement. So do you have a copy of it with you, Ben, that you could hold up?
No, I don't.
Okay, so if you could just hold it up so that camera can go ahead And Jonathan in the back there, if you can zoom in on that, you might be able to see, let people see it. But in the upper right corner, what you have is the high school, and across the street from the high school is a proposed parking lot, and then to the left of that, a hat shell. In the lower right corner, there's an oval, and that's sort of a zoomed-in version. Look at what the hat shell in the audience would look like. Now, maybe Ben, if you can turn that around so you can show other folks too, because now the camera got that. But this is an idea that I really like, and I think the idea is what's important, maybe not just the placement of it, because Gary would be able to tell us a lot more when we do in the deliberations probably later on about like what would be involved with this, because there's all sorts of, well, actually, Gary, rather than me explain it, why don't you explain it? For doing something like this, like wetlands and all, propose something like this.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're talking about permitting, Mayor. Yeah, I mean, I don't know off the top of my head. It's the first time I saw that. So, whether or not we build a parking lot with asphalt, we could build a parking lot on compacted gravel. Another thought is we could just cordon off an area and have people just park on a grass area too, so we don't have to incur the expense of a parking lot, because then you have that flexibility, because once you build that, that's there, it's a permanent structure. So the concept of accommodating vehicles there, so you have more area for more people to come to. If you think Capron Park is a little small or is kind of outlived its life for those kinds of purposes, we could definitely determine where the appropriate place is for that parking area. If there are wetlands or other resources we have to permit for, then we can look into it. But one way to save a little money is maybe, rather than having a permanent parking lot for 1,000 vehicles, because that's a massive area, is there's lots of places you see where we go to, where when we did the Wilmot Street dedication, if you remember, the Attleboro Land Trust with the Conservation Commission had a lot of vehicles coming off Wilmot Street. They had an area in the back where cars could park on the lawn. It's temporary. Its use for that day was parking, but then it's not completely dedicated to a parking area. We could then use that area for something else. But for parking, we could certainly look into an area where we could dedicate, on a temporary basis, an area for parking. With respect to the road, again, depending on areas of floodplain, wetlands, we would just see where those areas are, and then, again, rather than building maybe a straight road, sometimes if you have it meander through, it's a traffic calming technique. But the concept is fine, we understand, so I'm not being critical, is how we could then take that concept and fit it to the terrain. And as land planners, we have to see where the hills are. There might be, well, there aren't exactly hills, but if you walk around it, there's some areas that kind of go up, some areas that come down. There's trees, you want to avoid the trees, there's little ponds there. So one of the things is, rather than taking a straight shot in, maybe with a gravel road, you can kind of meander it through, which is kind of a more rural flavor. Plus it works with the terrain. You can avoid some of the resource areas. And again, it's like a traffic calming, so you don't have a straight shot where cars can, and cars, how many times we went to picnic areas where you could just park on the side and you can put up some rope areas so that you can't park any further away from the road. So it kind of creates, and then it's flexible. Then you just take it all down, you roll it up, and then you can roll that up for the next time. You know what I mean? So, but the concept is sound, I think.
Yeah, I love the concept of it, and so as Gary just basically pointed out, there's a lot we'd have to take into consideration. Where we can put it, where we can put a parking lot, where we can put roads, where we can put the hat shell, but the concept is sound. Does anybody have any questions for Ben? We have a couple people. Diana.
This is just for Gary. So I'm just trying to get an idea. 900 parking, what other area has that amount of parking, just for my own scale?
Oh, in terms of scale, yeah, like Emerald Mall.
Has about 900.
Right off Route 1 when you're heading north, I guess, on the left-hand side. That's about the size.
Okay. Just so I know.
That's probably bigger, but that's about the order of magnitude you're looking at.
Okay.
So Laura, you had a question.
I think this is fantastic, so I have two questions. As far as raising funds, how do you feel, how confident do you feel about that as far as fundraising, grants, etc.?
Well, I would say that there would be a lot of different funds available, but it would be something that would probably require a committee to investigate all the different areas. Certain things would be accessible through the Cultural Council itself and through the Massachusetts Cultural Council, as well as probably other capital resources through the state. and through private donors as well. So I think it would be something that we would probably look at doing the infrastructure first, and then building out a half shell as a second tier.
Because I think this is great, and you know, to have a place to go like this, so large, and I always think Gary's a genius anyway. But when you go to like the Big Apple, when you go to a huge flea market, you park on the dirt, and it's temporary because we know, like you have the Conservation Commission, like you can't have a car dealership parking cars on grass because oil and blah, blah, blah. But if it was temporary, it would be a whole different ballgame. So if we had events, like, you know, specific events, 4th of July, that would be temporary. And like you said, you put up cones, you have some kids with, you know, vests on going, go here, go here. I think it's great. I think it's amazing. And I think the biggest concern would be money, you know, as far as, you know, building something like this. But if you feel good about being able to raise funds, and obviously it wouldn't just, the burden wouldn't just be on the Cultural Council. I think we could just, you know, really do something, make an effort here for the whole community.
Well, another source is because we're a gateway city, we could always look at the park program with the gateway city too, so.
Right, right. Yeah, there's definitely different options, and obviously it wouldn't be all put on the Cultural Council to be able to do that.
You know, I have a few comments to follow up about the size of the lot as well. I did a count on the aerial view of the number of cars that fit in the high school parking lot, and it equated to about 300. So when you look at the size of the lot being for about 300 now, and we know how quickly that gets overflowed, even just on, you know, whether it's a big farmers market that happens, especially if there's an event at the zoo that is going on at the same time. And so when it comes time for the fireworks, I mean, it just overflows even far beyond that. And Attleboro is definitely a city on the rise in terms of population. And so if you look at what would be a minimum adequate parking, I think that 900 is not excessive by any means. And as it relates to using the grass as temporary parking, I think that's great, but one of the struggles that I have when I get out of the car, I have a 4-year-old, and she's not in a stroller anymore, but one thing that you find is that when you get a young one out of a car, you kind of wish that there was a nice, safe, permanent sidewalk close by. So I think that that's my challenge, but if you look at people with mobility issues or elderly folks who perhaps have mobility issues or other limitations, having that permanent infrastructure there, I think while we have the construction company there with the bulldozers and the concrete mixers and the asphalt, I don't think it's really too much of a stretch to ask them to go and make that access point that would bring you over, I believe, to the country club entrance. One of the other things is when you're going down Rathburn Willard Drive, it's very residential. So now that's going to be turned into basically a construction zone. If you had a back entrance to that, that would alleviate a lot of concern of the neighbors, I think, and a lot of the heavy traffic could use that access road to get to the construction point. And definitely during those busy peak times, having that back entrance there with a true street, although it would be sort of like a limited access street, I think, in terms of, you know, we wouldn't want people using it as a cut through, but if you were going to park there, definitely to have that there would be a huge benefit.
The high school project that we are working on, in fact, before we break today, I'm going to go up to my office and grab the schematics we have, but where you have basically like this area right here, where this is going to be where the parking lot for 350 cars is placed, right in this area, going all the way over to Al Dumont's house, which is right about here. So that's going to be a paved parking lot. And one of the ideas, you know, like this, the concept of this is good. I mean, Gary could, whether or not we can put it in this location, I don't think you're probably committed to a particular location. That's not what's important. It's the concept. But that's something that we could piggyback on. So the high school project would be picking up the cost of a paved parking lot, whereas, you know, we'd have to raise the money to do all of this other stuff like the hat shell here. And I love this idea of having the roads coming through, and you know, I think that's great. So there were a couple other people. George, you had...
I was just going to ask a question about the orientation. And so that's Rathburn Willard that runs along the top side of this picture. So you have the Highland Greens community there to the upper right-hand corner. Okay. Okay.
Those little semicircles you have, is that kind of elevated? Is it like an amphitheater? Like a slight slope, like maybe a couple of feet, so that as you just gradually go up, so everyone's not looking at everyone's back of their head?
I think.
Up a little?
Well, I think it's partially the design was truly sourced from the internet in terms of finding some sort of a half shell that was oriented in the right direction, that I could just express the idea for using it as a visual tool. So it's by no means any sort of an architectural or engineering drawing at this point, purely creative. So those thoughts would be the sort of input that we'd be looking for, definitely. But the concept of having the paths are to provide accessibility. So those will allow anyone who's in a wheelchair to get up to, those would be basically paved sidewalks or stone sidewalks.
Can you express a little more about your concern on congestion in that area? You have a 4-year-old, sidewalks, because there's sidewalks right along Rathbone Willard. I walk up and down that all the time.
Just in terms of the, not as compared to Rathbone Willard, but in terms of maybe using more of like the dirt parking lot approach. There's always a safety hazard. For instance, I was at the Attleboro Springs last weekend for the Spooktacular, and they used the grass lot for temporary parking there. And whenever you're getting out of the car, you always wonder, you know, where's the next car coming from? When you're driving out safely, you know, you look around for kids and you wonder, and of course without a doubt, there's always a kid that runs across the parking lot. So not that any of that would be completely avoided, but I think having permanent parking along the throughway on both sides in conjunction with some crosswalks would make for a really suitable and accessible aesthetic for the park.
Any other questions of them? Oh, Peter.
Ben, the Capron Park has the Ray Cunniff Bandstand, and there's also, I forget what it's called, where they have the sunrise services on Easter Sunday. What do you call that pavilion?
Oh, the Knoll Shelter?
Yes. Do events currently take place there, and what type of attendance do you get?
I haven't seen many events there. I mean, as far as I know, I'm not. I haven't researched this at all. But from the Cultural Council's perspective, we've had very few or no grant applications that have used that as a resource. So in some ways, I wonder, you know, what would the use case be for a half shell? But the good thing about a half shell generally is that they're relatively low maintenance. They don't have, you know, carpeting or a whole lot of things like that need to be updated. So it would be very similar to I think what we have at Capron Park in terms of maintenance. But the location and the parking, I think, would be a big opportunity. The biggest challenge with Capron Park, I think, is when it overflows, and I know it's only a few times a year, but when it does overflow, and parking in all the side streets I think becomes a nuisance for the neighbors. I'm not sure if it's, you know, if this park is $1 million park. I don't know if you know, parking at 4th of July is $1 million problem, but I think that this park would be, you know, definitely $1 million opportunity. And I think that the most important part truly is the throughway that brings you from the existing clubhouse through all the way to that parking. I think it's going to be a great way to get people in and out, especially during the Thanksgiving football game, as somebody mentioned earlier today as well in this discussion, or different times where it truly overflows.
My only concern about the throughway, and I actually wrote about this about 3 months ago, is living on Berwick Road. I could see that throughway being a cut through for students after school racing through, and you're shifting the responsibility from, or the burden I should say, from where it currently is, Rome Boulevard and Rathbone Willard Drive, to Mechanic Street and Berwick Road, which are, you know, Berwick is a curvy street and people race down that street anyway. So if something like this were built, I would propose maybe a gate that's closed unless events are being held there to help alleviate the problem. Any idea, Cultural Council, what type of certainly it would be used on July 4th, but throughout the year, what kind of acts would be playing there? I'd hate to build something with the hopes of, you know, if we build it, they will come, and other than once a year, it doesn't get used. I mean, we have 2 facilities at Capron Park right now which aren't used, apparently.
Right.
And I would add to that once the new high school is built, the existing high school is torn down, and there are lots of fields there, right? In terms of addressing your concern for overflow of Capron Park, that there are going to be all fields in that area. Is that all going to be continuous? Or
well, let me actually answer the first, to Peter's point, the use of this. One of the things that I've talked with the school department about is tying this half shell or hat shell? Is it?
Half shell.
Okay, half shell. Into, you know, tying it into the performing arts program with the high school, so it would be used on a regular basis. Now, most of school is, you know, in the cold months of the year, but it could still be used in the fall, spring, throughout the summer. Could also, you know, community events, just if some community band, you know, like Fred, he plays the guitar and drums and everything. He's like Bon Jovi over here. You know, he's just Fred. So, yeah, you know, it could be used by other people as well. But and George, your question was about the use of
just to his concern about overflow of Capron Park. Yeah. Is that when the new high school is built and that other high school is torn down, that's all continuous land, right? Open land, accessible to the public. Is that correct, or?
Still not following.
I don't have the vision of the ball fields are going to be built over there.
Yeah.
Right? Open land, ball fields, and.
You know what? Actually, at the end of this meeting, before we adjourn, I'll go to my office, grab the schematics that I have of where the high school is going to be, where the new parking lots are going to be, where the parking lot is for the construction workers is going to be on Highland Country Club, the 350 spots that are going to be paved. And then we could just piggyback off that. But let's table that for now. We'll grab that before we leave today. So,
just a note: it's known as a half shell, but Boston's is the Hatch Memorial Shell. So you were right on. You were right on both counts.
It was both. Okay, yeah. I've heard both, and so that makes sense. Okay. Any other questions for Ben before we have another? Oh, actually, there was one woman in the audience who wanted to comment or a question.
I wanted to ask if anyone had considered in thinking about this. I like the idea too. I've been in small cities that had like a single event. I've been a part of those events sometimes. And we used shuttles to help alleviate especially the access for disabled and elder. And that can alleviate some of the need for extra parking. Because we were in places that there was no option.
When we get far, I think the microphone was just turned up quite a bit. There we go. When we get far enough along and we actually have something when it comes time to the operations, that's a good idea to consider.
I just wanted it in the mix somewhere.
Very good. So, yes, ma'am.
Similarly, I would raise this question. There's a lot of issues about water runoff in places all over the country these days.
Gary Eurasian and...
my point is, do we have to talk asphalt? I think there are permeable surfaces out there that could be more organic or biodegradable or whatever the term is. But
the problem is that when there's people in the audience, nobody can hear you.
You're going to ask a question, can you go to the podium?
Yeah.
You can go ahead and step up to the podium if you'd like.
My name is Janice Stillman. I would just raise the question, the point of concern about water runoff and a consideration for, I don't know, pavement, but not necessarily asphalt, materials that are more permeable, perhaps biodegradable, but certainly don't allow water to just pour off into the street and other areas where somebody expressed a concern for oil on the ground, oil and other materials that might just run off into.
That's why I said earlier is maybe permanent asphalt parking lot. While we need parking, might not be the answer that we could use other, or if it's just be the grass, but another technique we use, particularly on Riverfront Drive. If you've been down, I'm sure you have, between Wall Street and Aller Street, where the on-street parking is, you know, the road kind of bends in.
Right.
That's all permeable asphalt.
Okay.
So if you were to take a gallon of water right now and go there, not the pavement, not the roadway, but where the cars would park.
Right.
If you took a gallon of water and dumped it, it would suck up like a sponge right now. So we actually use that technique, at least in Riverfront Drive, and certainly that's one technique there. Another version is, they used to say, there was a concept developed by the University of New Hampshire. They're actually bricks that go beneath the grass. So you don't see brick or any kind of constructed surface, but it's a subsurface. Then you put, loam's grass on top of it, so it looks like grass. But it absorbs it because the water will get through the grass and the soil, and then it gets absorbed by these permeable brick pavers. So that's another option too.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Well, okay.
Thank you, Gary.
I have one question,
Go ahead,
if I
yes.
can. So the Attleboro Cultural Council is the chapter of Massachusetts Cultural Council. State agency fosters art, science, and culture by awarding sponsorship grants to local cultural causes. What have you done? I know if you build it, they will come, but currently we have the Newell Center. I see that they do the music there in the summer. It's well attended. There's parking. The elderly can go up on their wheelchairs and so forth. There's accessibility for them. What other examples of requests to the Cultural Council have you had that you haven't been able to address with the current facility?
Well, in our priorities, we have a requirement that you have to have a location selected, and so it's since there's no half shell that's really adequate right now. I mean, if you look at the are you talking about the one that's at Lee's Pond?
No, I'm talking about the Newell Center.
It's at Capron Park.
They do the music there every summer.
Is it the square one? I'm not.
It's the rectangle. There's a square one that's elevated. It's sort of small. You could probably fit just a couple cars on it. But then you have the larger one. It's more of a rectangle, and that's closer to the actual playground. So there are two of them.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the opportunities that are around, there's not a lot of. For me, I mean, I'm just surmising here that. The aesthetics of that particular location don't really lend itself to a high-profile event of any magnitude. I mean, it looks like, I know there's been a DJ who's gone there during the summers, but it looks like the resources just aren't really there to have any sort of a concert or anything there.
So you're talking an outdoor event?
Yes.
Because you do have access, I would imagine, to the schools. Performance as far as their auditoriums, is that accessible?
We've certainly done events at schools, but I don't think that when we were talking about the best use of the land, it was more about what would be the best use of Highland Country Club, and I think a lot of your ideas that there are alternative locations to have a concert. Of course, there definitely are. But also for us to have a park that has amenities, with a half shell being one of them. I can envision a playground being here, being served by the parking in the thruway as well.
I guess I'm just stuck on the half shell part though. Mm-hmm. And if you've had any requests for outdoor venues. I don't know if the high school having the bleachers in the field, I don't know what the restrictions would be, but again, I'm just trying to figure out who would use this half shell.
I think that would be people in the future. There haven't been any requests that haven't been fulfilled because there's no...
So there haven't been any requests that have not been fulfilled?
No.
No, that's not true. The Triborough Youth Theater.
Thatcher School?
Yeah, Thatcher School. There's another one, there's another performing arts group that both of them have expressed an interest. In fact, that was where I got the idea for this. I mean, I don't know if you heard that I was thinking about this. Maybe we came up with it at the same time independently, but I met with Triborough Youth Theater in my office. It was one of the things that just popped into my head, and I said this would be a great place for something, because they were talking about the want for an outdoor performing arts, like a mini version of an Xfinity Center type idea. So there is an interest in this, and there's different performing arts groups that could use this.
In the high school, you can't use the field for anything but football. Like even during the fireworks, you can't go on the field. So.
Yeah. So, Juliet, you want to come up and say something at the podium? I did. Is this related to this, or is it a different issue?
Both.
We'll say thank you.
well, yeah, let's.
We're 40 minutes in, and I also have no time.
That's okay. We have.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I have some comments on this.
We're here for 2 hours, so but the let's go ahead and first finish up Ben, and then we can take it over to Juliet.
Yeah, we should wrap it up.
Yeah, we have been going. We have been chatting about this for about almost 40 minutes.
Okay.
So, okay, so let's go ahead and. We got the idea with this, and we're not really we weren't supposed to really go into deliberation about it, but I think we're also excited that, and we had a lot of questions about it, so let's go ahead and table this for now. Let's have another speaker come up with another idea, and Ben, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ben.
Take care.
So your name, your address, and when you begin.
I will. My name is Juliet Texera. I live at 5 Hanish Road in Attleboro, Ward 2. I am going to speak on a few different pieces. So I am on the City Human Rights Council, but I am not representing them. I am the coordinator of the Attleboro Community Garden, so I am partially representing that, and I'm also representing myself. So I just wanted to say that. So I welcome this opportunity to provide a few ideas and suggestions for the use of the former Highland Country Club for your consideration. And just as a little bit of my perspective, and I had sent a letter, I don't know if you had gotten this last month, but I grew up in Boston, and I grew up 2 blocks away from Franklin Park and the Franklin Park golf course. And at that time, the golf course was nearly abandoned. You might see golfers out there once a day. So it became our playground when I was growing up. And we had this massive area, it's bigger than Highland Country Club, to really do things as kids, to explore, fly kites. We launched model rockets, which I don't think we were supposed to do at that time. We did hiking and a lot of exploring and some other things. So that's a perspective I have. Now that golf course is now a very money's been put back into it, and it is actually it's a very busy golf course and not used for the way we used it when I was growing up. So that's just a piece of my perspective. So on a personal level, I'd like to see some more walking and biking paths. We don't have that ability at Capron Park, and especially in terms of biking, and I'd like to see those separate. That's just me. And a walking path should be accessible. It should, even though we have to realize there might be people in wheelchairs or they need some other things. And I'd like to see that separate. We saw a really great example in Vancouver at Stanley Park, where they have both walking and biking paths, and they're almost near each other, but they are separate, and it makes it very comfortable for people who are walkers not having to look out for the bikers or skateboarders. I'd like to see picnic areas for families and friends to enjoy, just an area that, picnic tables. Perhaps we could look at areas that we might be able to use for functions or family functions outdoors. I'm not talking about the inside of the house, the clubhouse. I didn't know if there's a potential to install a few barbecue pits or to allow people to bring in portable grills. Just a few suggestions. Now, in terms of the garden piece, I did just want to talk about that. So we would like, from the community garden, to see some additional plots be put in. Additional plots. Some plots or a community garden perhaps be established over at Highland Country Club, maybe 10 to 20 plots. I say this because at the current community garden, we have 62 plots, and we always have a wait list. This year, we were not able to accommodate about 10 people. We build a wait list and we give out the plots, but this year we couldn't accommodate about 10 people who came to us in April on. But we are not advocating that we move. We know this idea that's been floated to move the current community garden over to Highland, and we don't advocate that. So I just want to say that that's not an idea that's coming from us. It may be coming from others. We like our spot. We would like to see additional plots available and made available in the city. There's nothing to say we can't have more than one garden, and we have a garden at least in one school. I'd love to see that spread. So I did just want to say that. But there are some considerations if we are putting in a garden, so I just want to throw these out. before you do anything where you're looking to do any kind of a garden that's going to be food producing, you need to look at the land and do some studies to see, look at the toxicity, what chemicals have been used there at the facility and still remain. And if we're going to create a spot that we say is free from these chemicals, what can we do to make sure that we're not going to have other chemicals flowing in? So when you have parks, you have golf courses, there are chemicals that are used. So you have to make sure that if you are going to do any kind of a garden for food producing, that you need to keep those chemicals away. And then you also have to make sure that there's available water source. You have to assure accessibility. That is another thing. When we renovated our garden in 2015, we made sure that not only do we have accessible plots, but we make sure that all of the paths between the plots are also accessible. So you need to make sure that you do that. You have to look at how it will be managed. It's actually not cheap to build up a garden, so you do have to look at getting grants. So the other idea I also had, and this is me personally, is I'd love to see a kitchen garden outside of the main house, and that would be used for like herbs and perhaps some leafy greens and things like that, and perhaps some of those things could be used if there is some kind of banquet facility or something, perhaps some of those things could be used in the cooking. So that's me personally, and I thank you for the work that you're doing and for listening to me. I did actually have a few comments. He left, but I like the idea of the half shell. That's me personally. I just wanted to throw out a few things. I also think that it's beyond music. I would love to see theater, dance out there. And one thing I just wanted to make mention, I'm a big concert goer, but more rock and alternative rock. But the city of East Providence has actually built a concert facility out at Bow Point Park, and they've done that in conjunction with Live Nation. And so I know that they're not, I'm sure that the city is not paying for it, but Live Nation is doing some things. So there is potential to look at, working with a company like that if you wanted to think outside of the box in terms of developing something. So I just wanted to throw that out.
Thank you. Anybody have questions?
Yes.
Juliet, Laura, go ahead.
What was the name of the place in Providence that you just said?
Bold Point Park.
Bold?
Bold, B-O-L-D.
Oh, Bold.
Bold
East
Point.
Providence,
It's East Providence, right? Yeah.
It's right here.
It was my first time going there. It was an interesting place to do. It's like right on the water, and it looked like it was in the middle of industrial whatever, but it was actually, it was very nice. What we have at Capron Park right now, I don't think you really can do the theater and the dance piece, and I would love to be able to have something like that.
Thank you.
Diana, you had a question?
I'm so glad you said you didn't want to move, no one wanted to move the community garden, because I think that that's what we were getting at earlier. We don't want to be sitting here thinking, oh, we're doing the right thing, we want to build this, people will come, if we don't ask the right questions. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like what you would like is potentially an addition or more spaces, but not move the whole.
Yeah, and there were reasons. I didn't want to go into that. If you have questions about that, I could ask, because I thought this was more about ideas, but there are reasons why I don't think we would want to necessarily move. If it has to be, it has to be. So we, and that I understand because we're on city land, but there are people, we like our location. We have a lot of walkers. We have some people uncomfortable about having to go even the fewer extra blocks to go to Highland. There are people who would love to be able to garden there as well. So I'm not saying that there aren't people who wouldn't want to do it. I think it's, we'd like to see additional plots.
Very good. Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have theater tickets, so I'm going to, I didn't dress up for you guys, just so you know. So I have to leave in a few. Thanks.
Hamilton.
Just want to make that clear to us.
Frank.
That's right. Probably good for you.
No, they were boss.
My name is Francis Balut, and I'm from Ward 1. What I have this morning is strictly my own opinion, and I'm very revenue-oriented at this point in time. And to also let you know that even though I live in South Attleboro, I frequently come up into the city and pass by the Highland Country Club main entrance. And I would like to see the clubhouse be put into condition, and the money, it seems like within the last day or so in the newspaper said that Attleboro was in the black and had, you know, enough money to do something. So I would like to see the clubhouse such that it could be rented out and monies could start coming back into it. So that was number one. And as far as bicycle paths and walking, I'm all in favor of that as well. And good examples would be the, right in Pawtucket, behind City Hall. They have a very nice path area there. Cumberland and Lincoln, Rhode Island, they have great examples of the way bicycle and walking paths should be created, all the way from Route 295 all the way down into Central Falls. And Pawtucket has their paths that go from where the carousel is. Actually, the path itself stops on the street where it's advertising the park itself, and then that goes behind the carousel and goes out by a pond that when I had gone out there a few years ago, they had like 200 white swans. So just the beauty of the walk or travel. And lastly, I would like to suggest, since the old Attleboro High School has a good-sized greenhouse, and I want to relate that to Endicott Estates, where I'm sort of a car lover. That's my calling. Well, in Dedham, the Endicott Estate is so big. In addition to their main show, the second Sunday of July, they have on that property probably 2 full greenhouses, and they also have multiple garden spaces that are there. And I don't know if the existing greenhouse that Attleboro High School has is going to be included in the plans for the new high school. Because as an example, the swimming pool that we currently have in Attleboro, and I have to say from personal use a couple of weeks ago, the swimming pool looks like it was built in the 1930s. It's terrible.
Which pool are you talking about?
As far as money makers is concerned, I believe that having greenhouse and spaces, we could rent those out and collect money from that. So that's, say, 2 money makers, the greenhouse, the plots, and the clubhouse. Get that to a stage where it can be rented out. And to then fix the timer, because of course it would be important that the lights go on at night and they shut off in the daytime. So does anyone have any questions for me?
You'll be happy to know that I'm actually talking with one person right now who wants to rent out the bottom half of the country club, the old bar and restaurant area. There is somebody, an Attleboro person who's looking at renting that out. We haven't figured out the details of it. We'd have to go to bid for it, but that is a possibility. I mean, and it's likely that's what we're going to do with it. If we couldn't rent it out, there's also a possibility we'd turn the top half into like a new council on aging or something. I mean, that's to be determined. That's what we're talking about here. But George,
he referenced the swimming pool. Which swimming pool are you talking about?
In the Attleboro High School, if you come in from like the West Street Cemetery area, and as you go in and go to the left-hand side, you see Attleboro, but then a section that juts out off to the right-hand side. It's all lit up at night. Those that are there, they just walk up and get into that corner. And the newspaper had offered, it was Tim Killian that was in charge of that. And that particular night, there were, I guess, 2 lifeguards on duty, a male and a female. And but when I had gotten into the pool, I hadn't realized that it actually tapers from the 3.5 or 6 area down to the 9-foot section. It's not like the TI gym that's 4 feet all the way around the edges and you can stand up any place. But over there, all of a sudden, I haven't been swimming in a while, but I get down to the very end and I say, I'm in a 9-foot area, so I'm holding onto the rail on the top. And so then instead of doing the Australian crawl, I'm doing the backstroke, going back to where I had started. Then I asked him, I said, how do I get out of this pool? Because there are no steps or anything to walk into it. So the woman said, oh, I'll get a chair. And so they ended up putting a chair, so I got up onto the chair, and then I got up onto the floor of the pool itself. And I said, well, how do the swimmers get out? They just grab this here rail and give themselves a push on up, and they're out. But
thank you, Frank.
Thanks, Frank.
Yes.
Does anybody else have any questions for Frank? Well, very good. Thank you, Frank.
So,
see you Tuesday.
Thank you. Thank you.
He comes every Good morning. My name is Carol Shapiro. I'm 12 Revere Terrace, and I'm in Ward 3. I'm reiterating, he beat me to it, to suggest that the facility, the Highland facility, be used or set up, I don't know what kind of condition it is in right now, for functions for not only the paying public, but also some of the charities in Attleboro who can't use anything in Attleboro because they're too small. There is one place, and you also have to use their caterer for any functions, and it holds a lot of the charities, including the several that I'm familiar with, to have something that can pull in funds for us from the interested public. I've also thought about insurance for those particular things, and I know there used to be policies that could just cover the function. So if you were thinking about that as an issue, serving liquor for some of those functions, again, insurance policies that can be covered just for the night or the actual function. And possibly management. Johnson & Wales has internship programs, and they used to manage a restaurant in Seekonk that was quite nice. And maybe they could be approached for using that as an internship facility. Simple, that's all I've got to say. Anything?
Thank you. I like that idea of sort of the public-private partnership between the city and maybe Johnson & Wales. It's a way you can leverage and make your dollar go further. So I like that. But anybody have any questions for Carol? Questions, comments, stuff?
Just an add-on, and even like the culinary, like at the high school.
The bistro, cafe bistro, and the culinary group in the high school might be able to even do catering and make some money from it. And if we can use, there are several caterers in Attleboro, rather than just using one that we always had to use. It would be great to spread that money around and spread the publicity around on who's catering these events.
Very good. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
In the back, come on up.
My name is Ellen Farmer, and I'm actually a neighbor in North Attleboro, but I'm here supporting Juliet in gardening. I'm a master gardener, and I've done a lot of garden work. Worked at Native Community Farm, friends with Soul Homestead in Middleborough. I've been trying to save a historic farm in North Attleboro to do a community farm, kind of a garden project. But you have such a great opportunity and a wonderful space to not only extend your community gardening, but maybe even do a food safety, food justice kind of program where you grow to feed your people. So in trying to promote saving a farm in North Attleboro, I talked about growing food for people. I do a little food program, and I bring food to your town, Attleboro at Self-Help, from a private CSA, White Barn Farm, and the need is great. I bring food to low-income people at Self-Help. Someone asked me to add a veteran and a family who had been kicked off of food stamps, family of 5, and the mother has MS. So I added her to my rounds. Helping people and giving them safe, good food is really important, but you could have the high school be part of this. You could bring other schools into it for hands-on ed. Really important aspects that you could do. I also volunteer at Borderland, and they have a disc golf course that is so popular. Non-toxic. Hawkins Woods just opened in Plainville. They have a little 3-hole disc golf course. They're going to have a 9-hole. What a great opportunity. A lot of youngins come and do that disc golf. I thought they were cow hay feeders, and they all laughed at me. I said, oh, you got unique cow hay feeders there. Where are the cows? But they were disc golf holders. I went, oh, I didn't even know what that was. I called it Frisbee golf, and then they chewed on me. You don't call it Frisbee golf. They get mad at you. So anyway.
What does CSA stand for?
Community Supported Agriculture. So I can give you your closest example is White Barn Farm. That is a private, for-profit CSA. They're trying to buy their own farm from their family. So they have quite a few hoop houses, but they grow food for the public for shares. And you can certainly do that because that's your money right there. Your basic share at a CSA is $600 for the season. You can do working shares, you can do shared, half shares. A lot of different community farms have different aspects of how they do it. But your average share is $600 to $700 per family, and then you have single, but again, you can do it on an acre. You don't need that much land. I did talk to another resident in Attleboro, and they said there are areas of your golf course that probably have less toxicity. So, but of course, you'd have to do a soil test. UMass has great soil testing capabilities. So they have a soil testing lab. You do a cup from the area you're doing, and they give you a whole analysis. You tell them what you're going to use it for. I did 4 different ones on a farm I used to run, just because I had different areas, horse pasture, food source. But what an opportunity. One thing that Christy told me at White Barn Farm is they talk about food hazard, not just food safety, but if you have your own food source, your town, and something catastrophic happens, like your airport's closed and shipping stops. 9/11 is a good example of what happened then. But say it's even more expansive. Your stores are going to run out of food, but if you have your own farm, you have the ability to feed people in your area. Not a bad idea.
Who runs this? Who is it? Well, all volunteer?
It would be certainly a community project. You could base it on schools. In Natick, their farm is run by the education department, but their farmers are town employees, so they have a really wonderful setup. They work with Audubon. Before the schools go, they do projects on the farm, take it into the school, do science projects. So that's an amazing setup. It depends on how you run it. I'd be glad to help as a volunteer.
I know there is a farm in Attleboro, I can't think of the name of it right now, that I have a friend that they do similar type thing, and it's $400 for the season. They go from May to October, and it's a share type thing.
Yeah.
And they pay $400 for a full share or $250 for a half share, and they get vegetables every week, and it runs from May to October.
Yeah, it's like your grocery store.
Yeah.
They have a pickup every week, and then it's
I can't think of the name of it right now, but it's in Attleboro already. I'm sorry? It starts with an S. I can't think of the name. It's what?
7 Farms?
No. Not 7 Arrows.
No. It's over off Oak Hill Avenue. I can't think of the name of it.
7 Arrows?
No.
It's off Oak Hill.
It's not so.
But someone like that might also be interested in working with the community and doing that kind of
Yeah.
work.
And she might be. She's getting pretty popular. She actually wait lists now because the space that she has.
Well, what a great educational opportunity,
Yep.
too. But feeding people who need food and safe, healthy, local sourced, it's a great way to go. And think about
Sousa.
that disc golf
It's
thing.
Sousa.
Very
So that's
popular.
been mentioned.
Yeah. Again, Plainville, this is a little 3 golf course that's set up right now because they just opened their open space there, right on Hawkins Road. I went to the grand opening. They saved 100 acres recently, and they have all these great ideas they're going to do. So, anyway, good luck.
Thank you.
Any other
Might be a
questions?
resident here before long, you know.
Questions for Ellen? No?
Thank you. Oh,
No, you're good.
Just so you know, it's Sousa's farm. That's the one. Yep.
It's Rehoboth, it says, according to.
It's off that direction. I don't know. I haven't been to it myself, but my friend does
You don't
it.
know what you're talking about.
I'm Gary Crofter. I live at 7 Prospect Street in Attleboro, which is in Ward 2. I'm in walking distance of the
Can you spell your last name for me, please?
KROFTA.
Thank you.
All right. And first off, our first question is, during the acquisition of this piece of property, has there been or is there going to be a baseline survey of the environmental quality and conditions in natural community? Has that been done for this property yet? Is it in the pipeline to get this done?
If we need to do one, we would do one, but right now we're still in the transition, just transitioning over the electric bill, the oil and gas to make sure we heat the clubhouse. Just
Because I'm talking about
a lot of stuff like that.
That would be an assessment, a survey of the entire, like a survey. It would eventually be done. Because
Gary know better than I do.
We'll eventually have to do it.
We will eventually
have to do
Gary
it.
know
Any
better.
kind of
Well, yeah,
land
we're gonna have
acquisition.
Multiple uses, we'd have to understand the land, and so we'd have to have one done at some point.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Gary.
I would advocate for a restoration of a natural New England grass and wildflower meadow areas. I know there's a lot of talk about pathways and bikeways. Is it just going to go, and I'm wondering, would it just be going through a lawn area as we have like a golf course lawn type of thing? Or can it be maintained or restored into a natural a type of natural community that throughout the region, throughout New England, sort of disappearing and degraded. We're losing a lot of our natural meadows, grasslands, wildflower areas through regeneration of forests and also developments of housing developments. And there are a lot of birds and plants and insect species that depend on this type of
You're just saying
natural community.
Leave it as is.
Well, there are steps that can be taken to ensure that it's not just being taken over by a bunch of native species.
No, I understand, but regardless, you're talking about just leave it alone, no paths, no walk.
Oh, no, run the pathways through. The pathways can still run through a native area. There's talk about doing that, and I think that's a great area. Does it do the path? And my question is, are you going to run the paths through a lawn area, or can you, and there'll be other functions, maybe the half shell, community gardens, but there are going to be a lot of other areas that aren't being used, and I'm wondering if those areas can be restored into native New England meadow type natural communities, which is a very specific type of landscape that's beautiful, and a lot of animals and insects and bugs and plants that depend on birds, species, swallows, and swifts and bobolinks and sparrows and things like that. They use that specifically for nesting, meadowlarks.
The answer to your question is yes, it could be restored. Conceptually anyway, and that's the whole point of having you here, is to give us this idea and then if we adopt this as an idea that we want to, consider in the future, when the time comes to vote on this, then we say, let's go ahead.
It's sort of a rhetorical question. I'm asking, why can't it be? And And
I mean,
obviously it can be, because in a sense it's possible, but rather than just mowing the lawn every
that's something
6 months, you know, or every couple of weeks, have it grow as a natural type landscape.
Yeah, if we can get away from maintaining anything, so we don't have to pay Park and Forestry employees to mow the grass, that would be a really good use of it. Yeah.
And then the baseline survey would also let you know where you've got some of the knotweed or the bittersweet plants that you don't want encroaching into an area that you're trying to preserve back into, or to restore back into a natural native plants and grasses and stuff like that.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Yeah, I mean that's what I would advocate for. I don't know if it's it, but yes, and still have the hiking paths going through. There are different organizations you can go to, not necessarily Mass Wildlife, but you know, Mass Department of Environmental Protection. Some state or agencies that could help you out with that kind of program. You know, you can't use Mass Wildlife because you're not going to have hunting on it. So they only do for hunting. They'll do wildlife restoration, habitat restoration, only if you're going to have hunting. But there are other groups. So that's what I would advocate for. And I guess that's any other questions.
Any questions or?
Oh, I'd love to also see one of those ponds be turned into specifically an ice skating hockey pond. I think in the winter it'd be great to go out there and have a real hockey rink type skating area.
So do you mean with man-made improvements or just naturally? I'm not, what do you mean when you say into an ice hockey rink?
Oh, a skating pond. A skating pond.
Just allow skating to happen.
Allow skating on a pond out there, so that, and the kids will organize their own hockey.
What do you mean if it freezes on its own?
Oh yeah, yeah. You're not gonna. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of the ponds around here they don't let you skate on anymore.
Yeah, they don't let you. Yeah, we had a period of time where.
Ice hockey rink. I'm thinking chillers.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Oh no.
Naturally occurring.
Yeah, naturally occurring, not maintained. You're not going to give Zamboni out there to fix it. Just let the kids go out there. Just some place where you say this is okay for you to go skating on this pond, and they'll organize their own hockey games.
Always check the thickness of the ice harsh, right?
Yeah. Other than that, I think that's it, unless there's any other questions.
Very good. Thank you, Gary.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a quick question for Gary while we're on the subject of...
This Gary or which Gary?
This Gary.
This Gary. Yeah.
The Balfour River
As long
Walk.
as I don't have to get up there, please.
The Balfour River Walk, the cement pond, as the hillbillies used to call it. Wasn't that originally planned to be a skating rink in the winter?
Yeah. And unfortunately, what happened is after construction, about 5 or 6 years later, Sonny, the former park superintendent, found a crack. And every time we'd fill up, it would just drop down underneath. And the reason why it would just go out like a funnel, like just a sieve, is below that, we put in about 4 feet of nice clean gravel. And beneath that, where the slab used to be for the old Balfour building, instead of removing it, punching holes in it, just so it would drain. So you got a perfectly drained park there. So anytime it would rain to fill that pond, it would go into that crack and just go out like a sieve. We looked into chillers there to seal that, and with actually through the National Hockey League, we spoke with people. And back when I say back then, we're talking about 1998, 1999, or 2000. Then it was running about $800,000 because we were going to do this after it was built. So you'd have to have all horizontal drilling to get the neon pipes in it. Well, not neon. Freon pipes, yeah. So we were talking about 800,000 probably 20 years ago. So when you mentioned ice hockey now, that's what I was thinking. That's a big ticket item. So because of the crack, we just never we never filled it up anymore. We never fixed the crack either. So, but that's exactly what it was for. The kidney shape for that. We can have an naturally occurring ice rink as part of the centerpiece of that park, and it just never materialized. Good memory, though.
Hi, I'm Cecilia Woodworth. I live at 49 Forest Street in Attleboro. When I consider what Attleboro will look like in 10 or 20 or 30 years, I envision a vibrant, diverse community where families can afford to raise their children and seniors can afford to retire with dignity. Unfortunately, I also see local and area housing trends. Housing stock is limited throughout the region, and prices continue to rise. As Boston and surrounding areas get increasingly unaffordable, people will continue to move further and further out of the city. With 2 commuter rail stops and good schools, Attleboro prices will continue to rise. Attleboro is, after all, I think we can all agree, a really good place to live. But the new housing being built all over town is often far too expensive for the average Attleboro household, which is why I think that the old Highland Country Club is a great place to build some affordable housing, either ownership or rental, that fits in with the surrounding area and is thoughtfully designed. Now is the time when Attleboro can take steps to ensure that it remains a vibrant and affordable community. Once the housing crisis fully hits Attleboro, our work will be 10 times harder. Now is the time, and Attleboro Country Club is the place. I am not suggesting 90 acres of high-rise, super dense housing or 120 plus single-family homes, which would likely be priced out of reach of the average household. What I am suggesting is that this committee, the mayor, and the city council work to establish a comprehensive plan for the site that acknowledges the reality of housing in New England and follows the goals and recommendations of Attleboro's comprehensive plan. There are so many options available for a parcel of this size, affordable housing opportunities while protecting green space. There are local planners that create beautiful developments that meet community needs. But back to Attleboro's comprehensive plan for a minute. Goal 2 is for Attleboro to have 10% of the city's housing stock be affordable. We are not at that goal yet. Goal 11 is to provide opportunities that will create adequate housing to meet the needs of all city residents, specifically to encourage the creation and retention of affordable housing. Furthermore, it calls for Attleboro to proactively plan and develop affordable housing. There are so many resources out there to assist the city in creating a beautiful, functional site with affordable housing and potentially retail and definitely green space. I've already sent Mayor Hero contact information at the state's Department of Housing and Community Development, Massachusetts Housing Partnership, the Citizens Housing and Planning Association, and the Southeastern Regional Planning and Economic Development District. Any of these organizations would love to work with you to create a plan for the site. For those of you who say we don't need housing or we don't need affordable housing, that's just not true. I'd be more than happy to provide research and information that shows that housing, especially affordable housing, is needed here. To those of you who may not want dense or affordable housing, it's only a matter of time. Because less than 10% of Attleboro's housing stock is affordable, we are vulnerable to a 40B development. When a 40B developer comes to Attleboro, and I do believe it's when, not if, the city will have very little control over the size, density, or the level of affordability of the project. If the city were to take control of this site and develop housing to its desires, you control the entire process, not a developer. To those who say that housing will create too much strain on city resources, I can provide research that refutes that. I can also point to the state's 40-hour process that comes with financial incentives, up to $600,000. And the state's 40S process can reimburse the city for increased educational expenses incurred due to development. And none of that takes into account the increased economic growth that housing can bring. While I respect people's desire to have a golf course and truly understand the importance of green space, first and foremost, I believe everyone in Attleboro deserves a safe, decent, and affordable place to live. You can help provide that now and for future generations.
Very good. Questions for Cecilia? Questions, comments?
What level are we at? You said we have to be at 10% affordable housing in a community, otherwise somebody can come in.
So unless a community is at 10% affordable housing, it's vulnerable to a 40B development. Okay. And a 40B development allows a developer to build housing that goes against the city's zoning, so it can be more dense.
So what level are we at now?
We're at about 6.5%, 6 to 7%. But let me reassure you, let me tell you this too. All this, what the 10% rule is a 40B, and use the word vulnerable. So that's kind of a little contradiction. All right, if you're talking affordable housing, with all due respect, And then you're saying the 40B is a mechanism for affordable housing.
It is.
It could be at least 25, well, up to 25% of the housing development would be affordable. But on one hand, you're saying we need affordable housing. Then you say we're vulnerable to a 40B. The whole purpose of a 40B is to bring affordable housing.
Right, and I understand that.
I don't want to call that out, but it is somewhat of a contradiction.
No, I understand that.
So what the 10% rule is this, is if a community has, and that number changes every single day because developed houses are built and affordable houses coming. So it depends on what day you pick. It changes every day. So what the 40B is, if you're at 10% or more of your housing stock is considered affordable by the state, and they monitor it. If a community is petitioned with a Chapter 40B, also known as a comprehensive permit, the Zoning Board of Appeals, for whatever reason, if it finds a deficiency in the project, can deny it. But the conception out in the world is, well, if you're less than 10%, your zoning board, our zoning board, can't deny it. Well, it most certainly can. The fact of the matter is, because you're below that threshold and there is a glaring deficiency in your application, a technical deficiency, not we don't want it, totally uncalled for, a technical deficiency. Well, let me reassure you, if there's a technical deficiency in an application, my staff and the zoning board are going to call it out. But we're not going to say, okay, we'll overlook that deficiency because we're not at 10% and we're not going to, we have to approve it. Well, no, you don't. We'll take our chances. You go to the Housing Appeals Committee, just like any development. If you warrant the permit, you're going to get a permit. Because we're less than 10%, and if you don't merit the permit, I would never advise the board or the city solicitor or the mayor, well, we're scared, let's approve it. There's a deficiency. So we would go to the state. We would make our case. If they, just like the court, if we went to land court or superior court, if they support us, we prevail. If they overturn the board decision, so be it. So that 10% gives a zoning board perhaps a little more confidence that because we're at, if you're at 10%, you should still approve a 40B because it merits the permit. But because it's less than 10%, I would never advise a board, well, we're less than 10%, we have no chance of winning an appeal. Well, let's grant it. Of course not. That's not prudent development. As you said, you want a well-planned development that's best for the city. Because the developer says, well, you're less than 10%, you have to approve it. No, we don't. We would take our chances. But let me also reassure you, if we were at 20%, I would never advise the board to say, hey, we got 20% affordable, we don't need this. Absolutely, you would still issue the permit. So that 10%, we could talk about it some more in the city plan.
Yeah, no, I know.
Very cogent argument, well written, very articulate. I'd love to talk to you about that. But I agree, every community needs affordable housing. It isn't anything new. It's not going to be any time old. We need it. But on that 40B, whether we're at 10%, less than 10%, greater than 10%, if you merit a permit, you're absolutely going to get a permit in the city. So, and I give that to you as a matter of assurance as well.
So the other issue with 40B is, like you said, it can only be like a certain percentage affordable, which means you can build a bunch of market rate or luxury housing and put in some affordable units and have it fall under there and get certain height things and density things that the board wouldn't normally approve. But if you took this in your control, you could build 100% affordability. You could do housing for extremely low income versus people who are just low income, like different levels of affordability, which wouldn't necessarily be considered in a 40B development. There's just a lot more control if the city were to take this over now instead of leaving it to a developer who's going to come in who, while they build some affordable housing, is probably more profit motivated.
So are you talking about the Attleboro Housing Authority perhaps initiating a project on the project? Because the city doesn't have,
so I don't know that the Attleboro Housing Authority develops property. I know they own a bunch of, they manage. I don't know that they develop it. There are certainly nonprofit and for-profit developers who could come in. You could do it either through a ground lease so that the city controls the property long-term. You can do a ground lease for 99 years, something like that. You could sell the plot and put things in the deed. There are different things you can do to still maintain control.
But it would still involve a developer, though.
Yeah, it's still involve a developer, but...
I thought what I heard you say is that the city do it.
No.
Right, okay, so we would...
No, I'm not advocating that you develop.
Involve a developer.
Yeah, you would still work with a developer. But because you own the land, you can control what happens on it.
You're talking about the Highland land?
Yes.
Yes. Very good.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Cecilia? No. Thank you, Cecilia. Anybody else from the audience like to present some ideas? Come on up. Yes, ma'am.
Not really sure I have to come up at this point. It seems like everybody's addressed what I was going to address.
What's your name?
Jane Teague Urbach. Janie. It's a hyphenated last name, TEAGUE-URBACH.
Say that again slower, please. TEA.
Teague, like Little League, only with a T.
TEAGUE.
And then hyphen Urbach, which is a German name, URBACH. And I live at 167 Dennis Street in Attleboro in an apartment in an old, very old house. And I'm fairly new to this place. We've been here 3 years. Well, probably more closer to 3.5 now. And I'm really impressed with the community. I've always been involved in the community that I'm in. And I bring, my husband and I together, we bring, we're interested in all the things that have been discussed. Wetlands, land restoration and or preservation, music, theater, walking and riding, accessibility. My husband and I actually went to, the first year we were here, we were excited to go to the July 4th thing, and we struggled to get there. My husband is on chemo, so he doesn't have the strength to walk a long way anymore. And we did have some difficulty, and we didn't go the next couple years because the accessibility problem. So I liked the idea of addressing that, but not just for one gathering. I think
Ms. Teague, when you said access, that's really concerning to me in terms of traffic congestion, in terms of sidewalk, when so you said accessibility.
Well, we couldn't park close enough.
I mean, that's something we can fix right away, so.
We couldn't park close enough.
Okay.
And we had to walk a long way, carrying our chairs. And
where did you park, on one of the side streets? Or
actually, I think we ended up, with the first time, we ended up parking on one of the side streets. Actually, it was a place where they told us to park, but it wasn't anywhere near like close to where we actually ended up.
You shouldn't have to wait to do something on Highland Country Club to get you to the 4th of July. So if you don't mind.
Well, actually, the second year we couldn't see it, but this year we actually got to see a lot of it from our window. So we were, but yeah, I think it should be something that's addressed. There didn't seem to be a lot of accessible parking.
Okay.
And by accessible, I mean to make it. Yeah, I mean, most people, when you say accessible, they say wheelchairs. Well, we don't have a wheelchair. He tries to walk as much as possible.
Something more convenient, closer?
Just closer, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And a shuttle. I mean, I've been a part of a lot of small cities. That's where we tend to live. And I've been a part of the events that happen there. Sometimes it's the biggest event of the year. In Chico, California, we were part of the Endangered Species Fair. In Renniesville, Oklahoma, we're part of the, once a year, this town of 60 becomes a town of 5,000 for 3 days. And so, yeah, accessibility issues, that kind of stuff is something dear to my heart.
So what I'm hearing you suggest as an idea is that we use some of this land for parking for 4th of July and other events that happen.
Well, I like what I've heard him say about parking.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the idea of a 900 parking lot. Like
yeah, that would be a very, very large. Yeah, the three. I have schematics of the 350.
And for one event that's that big, that doesn't seem.
Yeah. Well, we are going to develop a 350-car paved parking lot for the construction workers for the next 4 years, because they're going to be there every single day for 4 years as the high school is developed.
Yeah, that's not my biggest concern. I mean, I just want to see whatever is built have accessibility taken into consideration. Elderly, disabled, not necessarily in wheelchairs, but just members of the community that aren't that able to I also like the idea of the restoration and having walking and the bicycle separate. In Chico, they had walking also included strollers, and that kept them out of the way of fast-moving bicycles and stuff. So that was nice. And also the idea of meandering and not being through just grassy areas, but through around the wetlands and around the ponds, and a restoration of wildflowers and meadows. I really like that idea. So basically, I've been sitting here listening to everyone sort of suggesting what I was going to suggest, and I just want to put a big 10-4. But also, yeah, not moving the garden, but expanding the garden is something I think I would recommend. I know the difficulty of having a waiting list, and I think that food, the lady that was talking about expanding food availability to our own community hungry people. I like the idea of having functions in the house, especially for the nonprofits in the thing. That's always been a problem. That's a problem in every town. So it sounds like you're all thinking about all the right things. And I'm just gonna say, yeah, go for it, do it. I love the half shell thing. I think there is if we build it, they will come aspect to it, because theater groups, music groups, having a band, the city having its own, you know.
I remembered the other group. You have the Triborough Youth Theater, but then you also have the other youth group, not youth, the other theater group that operates out of the Mason Lodge. Which one is that called?
Attleboro Community Theater.
Attleboro Community Theater, yes, they're also.
Yeah, I've been thinking about getting involved with them. Yeah, Shakespeare in the Park could happen there, you know, that kind of thing. It could be a lot of stuff could happen once you had one of those.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Jane? Anybody have any questions? No? Okay, very good. Thank you, Jane.
Oh, and the shuttle idea.
Yes. Thank you. Anybody else from the audience have ideas before we wrap up for the day? No?
Can I say something?
Oh, yeah, also
Sorry.
people from the task force here, if you have ideas you want to propose that so your name for the audience again?
My name's Carol Condolinka Conley. I've been a resident of Attleboro since '02. Having toured Highland Country Club and seen it, one of the things, although I support the walking trails, the biking trails, foremost I think that they should rent out the function hall if at all possible to a restaurant, caterer, whoever, to start getting some money back for the city to pay for the purchase. But I'd like to see us go slowly as we develop the land, see, you know, what's the best place for what.
Oh, yeah.
I really like the idea of the half shell. My kids and I went way, way down to the Cape this summer because they had a little tiny half shell and they were putting on a day in the life of a pirate, which was, you know, after a children's story. And I paid $15 per ticket to go all the way down and then, you know, stay at the Cape and do stuff. But it's just a little tiny one. They had bench seats. We parked in a field. We walked over. If you're thinking of this idea, I encourage you to think beyond the porta potties for nearby, especially with children and elderly and big crowds. Maybe some solar and composting facilities could be used because they're greener. And I also, if you're going to plant trees before Attleboro makes a really big purchase for trees to prevent cutting down all the mowing and stuff that has to be done because there's a lot of grassy open space, I encourage us to contact the Arbor Day Foundation for free trees, plant some local trees that are native to our area, and also piggyback off of what our farm supporters said, and that if you're going to plant some trees, plant some edible trees. There's no reason why we can't have some apple trees in there, pear trees for cross-pollination, and that can't be used to feed our local food pantries, or that people can't come in. You could have a community event, and when you plant those trees, have the community come in, maybe purchase a tree to raise some money for some other plantings going on there, and dedicate it to someone in their family. And then the other thing I'd really like to see is just kind of a small hilly area for sledding for children. Right now my kids and I sled over at Holden and Starkey Street, right connected to 123. And it's a nice little steep hill, so it's really fun to go down. It's hard to walk up, and there's not a lot of parking in the area, especially with the big snowbanks. I mean, there's a little parking lot there because there's also a playground.
Oh, is that Horton Field?
It might be Horton Field, where they play lacrosse.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's on. I don't know. Is that Starkey? Is that the Starkey side?
It's off of Starkey, yeah.
Yeah. That's all Pleasant. You take a look. Yeah. That's what.
So there's not a lot of parking off the street there, and with the snowy conditions, it'd just be. I think it'd be nice to have a parking lot with maybe a function hall that's rented out, where you can go have cocoa afterwards or lunch with your kids or something like that. But that's it. Thank you.
Very good. Anybody else from the group want to propose ideas? Anybody? Oh, yes, go right ahead.
I just have
your name again for
it's Margie Kelly from Ward 3. This may be more procedural, but things I've been thinking about. We maybe want to establish some kind of a written mission statement that might help guide some of the final decisions. That mission could maybe sort of enumerate some of the values that everyone might agree on for the space. It might help us slow down.
For like the report that's going to come from this task force, that would be a good place for that. And what I'm going to do next is put all the ideas that we've heard together, all on a list, identify whose idea it was or maybe not, and basically then next time we get together we can vote on that. But we can also come up with that type of vision statement, maybe not mission statement, but vision statement, like what the purpose of these 3 meetings were, plus I'll probably have a couple more meetings after this. And
but I agree, Mayor, with what she said, because that will drive the final list rather than the list driving the
Well, that's actually what the point of the list is supposed to do, is to drive that, because then these ideas then say, this, based on these ideas, this is what we want to do with the land. So we would need to know what we're in agreement with before we were to come up with that, rather than have, I mean, we'd have 17, 18 different mission statements, but after we get those ideas we're all voted on, then we can say, these are the ideas that are driving the future use of it. Chicken egg argument. Yes, Diana.
I agree. I think what everybody's saying, because then 50 years from now, if we do take it slow, there's going to be another group of people, and they can say, well, they really wanted, this is really what they wanted to see, or just to kind of as a guide or a foundation of what could potentially happen. Yeah. Because out of this, we have so many ideas, and we'll probably pick 1 or 2, and obviously money is a big factor. But then down the road, 100 years from now, somebody could be looking at that and saying, well, they could dig this up and say, this is what they were really hoping for, and are we still looking for that? So I think it's good.
We can put a timeline on it. You could make a priority list. Nothing says, we're going to do everything all at the same time. Oh, no, so along your timeline, whether it's 20 years or not, I mean, we could do 1 or 2 items the first couple of years, then just like any other plan, right? And every 5 years, we go back and recalibrate, what we've accomplished, what we haven't, reprioritize. So it's not like whatever we write as of December 2018 or spring of 2019 that the die is cast forever, right? So, you set our priorities, put a timeline on it, recalibrate I said 5 years, I don't know, every few years, maybe try to put a budget together, maybe weave it into the capital improvements, Mayor, so, it's on the council's radar screen as well,
Let's go ahead and we can do a couple different things right now. We've been here for over an hour and a half, and what I think would probably be a good idea is if we pick another date for another meeting, not where we're taking ideas from the public, but where we're in deliberations about the different things. And what I'll do next, I took notes on everybody that came up and all the different ideas that were presented. I'll put all those together in a list, and then maybe next time we can have some deliberations, really talk about the pros and cons of those, try and sway each other. I said before that I'm actually not going to be a voting member. I'm just going to vote only to break a tie, and then you guys can vote. And then these ideas that we vote on, if something is a no vote, then we don't put it in that final document. Doesn't mean that a future mayor might not do that. Maybe this is just a task force to help guide the use of the land. Nothing is binding. But we can come back next time, whenever that is, hopefully sometime soon, deliberate on these different ideas that we've heard over the last 3 meetings, talk about the pros and cons, and then vote on them, and then put all that stuff together in a final report with a mission statement, or a kind of a vision statement, if you will, a vision for the plan, for the land. So let's talk about dates. How's that sound?
Okay, can I just ask, so is there gonna be one central document that's gonna capture all these thoughts?
Yes.
So that everyone's working off the same list?
Yeah, I'm going to put that together myself, and I'll probably circulate that in advance of our next meeting, and that way, we'll open it up to AACS as well. The deliberations, and that's when we're going to go ahead and just have a nice, good old-fashioned sausage-making party where we're just, we just talk. They say you don't want to see the sausage made in politics. Well, we're going to just go ahead and do it. We'll agree on things.
Never quite heard that.
We'll disagree on things. You never heard that before? Politics is like sausage making. You don't really want to see how it's done. It's a saying.
You say so.
You don't want to see what's going on. But yeah, so let's go ahead and pick out a date. I am actually going to be on vacation between October 28th and November 8th, so let's go after November 8th. Do you guys like doing this on a weekday or a Saturday morning? We'll say weeknight or Saturday morning. What do you guys prefer? Any preference? How about, okay, show of hands, a weeknight. Who prefers the weeknight? Who prefers a Saturday morning? Okay, that's what I thought. So let's focus on a weeknight. I agree. I was hoping for that too. A weeknight. How about, okay, Monday night is school committee night. Tuesday night is city council night. Wednesday night is a possibility, but Gary, what meetings do you have on Wednesday nights for the different boards and commissions that often happen?
Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays.
So Monday.
But it depends. Like on a zoning board is a Thursday. It's only the third Thursday, so it's not every Thursday night.
Okay, so let's the third Thursday.
That I wouldn't be able to make it.
Okay, you would. Okay, so how about December?
I'm sorry, Mayor?
Yeah.
I apologize. It's the second Thursday.
Second Thursday.
It's the second Thursday. I'm sorry.
Okay. Wednesday night, is there availability here? There's no availability Wednesday night? Okay, so how about the, you said it's the second?
Well, don't revolve it around me, please. I mean, it's the committee.
Well, we need this. We want you here because of your area expertise.
Yes.
You can't do the second Thursday.
Right, so the first, third, and fourth, I'm fine.
Okay, let's focus on the first Thursday of December. What's that?
Oh, December, you're right?
Yeah, first Thursday of December.
It's the 6th.
The 6th, yeah, December 6th. Does that work for everyone?
For me.
First Thursday. Okay, so what I'll do is I'm going to put together a list of everything that you can't do the 6th. Surgery. Okay.
So today's what? Today's the 20th. So that's out. That's 6 weeks out. So you don't want to go that far out, man.
Well, the November 8th, I'm going to be on vacation. I'm coming back probably like sometime.
How about the 15th?
About November 15th.
Yeah.
Gary, November 15th is the 3rd November, though. I'm sorry, the 3rd
second
November.
Thursday.
The second I can't, so the third Thursday's fine.
Oh, that's the third Thursday.
Yep.
So November 15th?
November 15th is not a good day because we have the joint meeting of the new school at 7 o'clock. We could do it earlier in the day, 5 o'clock. That's probably not a good idea. No. How about 22nd is not a good idea. Thanksgiving.
29th is right.
29th. Does that work for everybody at 7 o'clock?
29th of November?
Of November.
What day is it?
It's
Thursday. It's the Thursday after Thanksgiving.
What time is it going to be at?
7 o'clock, Thursday, the 29th, November 29th. Does that work for everyone? Okay. All right, let's do that then. We'll go ahead and reserve that. Okay.
I'll just move my stuff.
So what I'll do is,
nice to meet you,
when we meet again on Thursday, November 29th at 7 o'clock here, what I'll do is I'll actually bring that schematic I have of the parking lot where that's going to go. I have it up in my office right now, and a couple other things. Then I'll also, before then, I'll send everybody a list of all of the ideas so you can start thinking about them and just have everything. And also maybe possibly I missed something I didn't include, so I accidentally left something out. We'll hash out the ideas, weigh the pros and cons of the ideas about what we want to see done with this land, and possibly that time we would vote, maybe the next time.
Okay.
You know, but we'll figure it out then. Any questions at all? I know. Any questions from anybody?
I'll reserve the meeting room.
Okay, great.
I'll do it on
For this?
yeah.
Okay, great. So,
yeah, right, correct? Same.
Yeah, here, yes.
Yeah? Right.
Yeah.
We still gotta put this back together, so.
Yeah, good. Frank, you had a question?
Everybody run off. Everybody go.
A solar farm.
That was one of the, yeah, that's been on there. Yeah, somebody else proposed that, yeah. Cool, thank you, Frank. Okay, all right, we're adjourned for today. We have to fix this room so we can vote next week.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you all.